So a while back, I saw this President Chay video where he built his own teardrop camper and pulled it behind his Prius. And as I also have a Prius, and as I also like to build things, I was like, sounds like a great project. So I started on this project based on his plans. He didn't provide them, but I just kind of looked at his video and figured it out. And started with a couple of sheets of OSB that I cut to size to fit on the trailer. And then I was going to sandwich those two pieces around a frame made out of treated 2x4s. So here I'm cutting those 2x4s to length, and once those have all been cut to length, I'll secure those together with pocket screws in order to make sure everything is square and held together nicely. Here I'm going to drill all the holes for the pocket screws before I realize that I have to go to Lowe's and buy the correct length screws because I don't actually have what I thought I had. So here I'm actually securing it together. And then I put one long strut in the middle to make sure everything was square and plenty structural. Once I had that internal structure built, I could put one of the pieces of OSB on top of it and screw it down to keep everything how it should be. And then once I had that half together, I could mark the mounting locations on the trailer so I knew where to drill out the holes. Before I did that, I needed to build the trailer. So I just bought a Harbor Freight trailer made out of sheet metal and put that together. It's good for 1,100 pounds, I believe, and the trailer only ended up weighing about 500, so we should be fine there. You see, I did put the fenders on, but I did eventually take those off because they interfered with the door opening and closing. Here I just put my frame on the trailer, put two pieces of OSB on each side to center it up, and then marked all the mounting hole locations. Then I got to drilling all those mounting hole locations, and here's where I ran into a slight issue where the outer holes actually interfered with the 2x4. So I had to get another 2x4, put it in there so that I could actually drill out and chisel out an area where I could actually have my mounting screws. Kind of a pain, but you got to do what you got to do. So I finished all that up, and once I had gotten those in to place how I wanted them, I just put insulation in that whole area and then put the other piece of OSB on top. And here I'm drilling out those mounting holes and then cutting out all the foam insulation so that I can actually access those mounting holes later. I built the sides out of plywood and cut those the same way I did with a straight edge and kind of sandwiching them on top of each other. And I decided to go with a more squared off approach. I thought it would make it easier from the building side than President Chay's curve, and I think it did make it easier. Since I was filling every gap anyway with wood filler, I figured it didn't really matter if I was filling up a few extra points where two pieces of plywood met. Here I am cutting to length all the struts in between the two sides, and then I'm cutting them to width here on the table saw. They're 1.5 by 1.5 inches, so they could go in any orientation. So here I'm putting those in place. I nailed and screwed and glued all of the struts into place so that they weren't going anywhere. And here's where I ran into another issue, is once I put in all of those struts, I figured out that I hadn't drilled all the holes for the electrical wiring, so I had to do that in place. And then I put in more struts and accidentally got my air compressor stuck inside the frame, but hey, I need a door anyway, so I went ahead and cut out a door that I'll enlarge later for the actual door that I'll install. Here I'm going to install all of the internal sealing of the camper. That was just brad nails and glue as well. Once that was in place, I could get into wiring the whole thing up. I put two outlets in the camper as well as two lights in the ceiling. So here I'm wiring up the lights to the light switch, and then once I did that, I wired up the two outlets as well, and then I tested everything, made sure it was working. You can see the light there that it did actually work. So I'm running the last little bit of wire. I'm cutting the window that I have and making sure it fits. It took a little bit of finagling, but I did get that in place. Here I'm cutting all the foam insulation to size to fit in between all those struts. I cut 2 pieces of 1/2 inch and put them in there. It's 1 1/2 inch, but let a little space to let them breathe. Once I had all that insulation in place, I did a little bit more on the top where all the lights were, and just kind of cut everything to size and tried to fit as much insulation as I could in that area to make sure that it was going to keep as much heat or as much cold out as possible. And then I put on all of the top and sides of the camper over all that insulation. Once I had all those outside pieces on, I could get to filling all of the extra holes left over by screws, by brad nails, etc. And so I finished up the electrical here, and then I started on the filling, which my brother helped me with since there was a lot to do. So we filled all of that up, and then I did actually fill the bottom as well because I want a good painting surface. So I did all of the top. We put it on its side so I could fill all of the gaps on the bottom, and I filled those as well. And then I put it back up with plastic underneath of it to hopefully shield the garage floor from some of the paint and some of the truck bed liner that I used to seal the whole thing. It worked a little bit, but it could have been better. Here I'm just sanding everything and then cleaning off all the sawdust to prepare it for paint. Here I'm starting with the truck bed liner. I initially started pretty conservative in the amount I was using because I didn't know how much it was going to take, but I realized that I didn't use as much as I thought I needed, so I went back with a second coat that was a lot thicker, and I think helped with the waterproofing of the whole camper. I again did both the top and the bottom because you're gonna have water come at it from the bottom too when you're like driving down the road. So I wanted to make sure that was as waterproof as it could be as well. Here I'm going to paint with an off-white. Again, the white will kind of reflect the sunlight to also, in addition to the insulation, keep it cool in the summer. And I put a couple coats of that on there. I also then went back with some green paint, just kind of add some pinstriping just for fun, and I think that turned out pretty well. Here I'm just using masking tape to create that design that I went with. Once I had all the paint in place and I'd done everything, that's when I started doing all the inside stuff. So I also painted the inside because I didn't want just the raw plywood showing. Other than the ceiling, I thought that kind of had a good aesthetic, but I wanted to paint the sides, so I painted all that with the extra green I had from pinstriping the side of the camper. And the lights working at this point were a big help. Here I am installing the trailer hitch on my car. It was a little bit of an annoyance to get to everything because you have to go around the exhaust system, but I got everything connected pretty well with a little bit of help from my sister-in-law. And connecting the trailer to the car, and then we're going to put the camper on top of it to actually secure everything in place. I did have to go back to the hardware store and get some washers because my bolts were not quite as long as they should be. And there's the final product on my car. I think it looks pretty well, and it works good as well. I've slept in a couple nights now, and I'm happy with it.